Welcome to Business Connection. I'm Liz Spencer. We have a wonderful guest in studio today. It's Mark Taylor. He's president and founder of Clearview Sales Solutions. Mark, welcome.
Thank you.
Tell me a little bit about your company and what you do.
You know, I've got an interesting observation.
Okay.
That, you know, I've never found any company or business stakeholder that didn't want to make more money.
I think you're true. Very true on that.
And there's really only two ways to do that. You
Okay.
can either cut costs or you can either grow your sales. And after a while, cutting costs, you get some diminishing returns, and then you can't support the business growth and things. So I take a different approach. Mine is to help businesses grow, get their cash flow growth through revenue growth and sales growth.
That's wonderful, because I think that is probably a place where companies struggle the most, is with sales growth. What compelled you to do this? Why this? This is hard.
Yeah, I've worked for a lot of large companies in sales, marketing, leadership roles, and one of the fun things that I thought was fun was developing strategy for both sales and marketing groups, and then being able to implement and execute that strategy and work with the sales teams and have that be a successful strategy. Now, you're always optimizing the strategy. It's never one strategy fits all, and it's continued to evolve. So I really enjoy that part of it. And that's what compelled me, because now, with Clearview Sales Solutions, I can work with multiple different companies and I get to go in and help them grow their business and cash flow.
Right, and you get to do that part you really like, which is strategy and development.
That's right, and implementation.
And implement over and over again.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about the types of companies that you work with.
Typically, they sell business to business or B2B,
Okay.
and so, or they want to sell B2B. I work starting with venture capital. I can work with venture capital companies, and what I do there is, as you may know, venture capital is very, very risky for some, for the investors. So they like to make sure that they have as much deep dive intelligence as possible. One of the things they often overlook is developing a good sales plan. Who are we going to target our products to? What value proposition do we have? Who's that going to be compelling to? So we get that data up front, understand how we're going to go to market. Is it going to be a direct sales team? Is it going to be a manufacturer reps? What geographical area? So I think that venture capital thing is very, very important. The second component of folks that I work with would be private equity companies. And private equity companies, it's not quite as risky as venture capital, but a lot of times they'll bring a CFO, a CEO, and maybe some HR folks in to do the due diligence of an organization. They sometimes overlook, and often overlook, the whole sales and marketing piece. And the sales and marketing piece is what is really going to generate cash flow for the investors of the private equity company. So it's important that we go in and we understand what's in place, what's not in place, where we need some work, and that may change the complexity of the deal for the private equity company. But so that's often overlooked. And the third component would be folks that are already in existence. Maybe it's a second, third generation family member that's taken over a business, or maybe the business has just grown to a point now they're just kind of plateaued. And so I go in and we take a look at what they're doing and how we can get that kick started again. And so those are the three types of businesses I work with.
That seems like an awful lot to do.
It's fun, yeah.
That's great. So there's lots of business consulting firms out there. What makes you unique?
You're right. There's a lot of really good consultants out there, a lot of good business coaches, and I think that's wonderful. Because I've worked for corporations, I've had to do both the strategy development, the consultation, as well as the implementation. And so I kind of offer the 1-2 punch for my clients. I do the consulting, which is strategy development, but I'm there to make sure that the sales team's in place. I make sure that the sales team can execute the strategy, monitor that execution, and make improvements and optimization where need be. So I kind of have that 1-2 punch versus just
the one.
Yeah. And so what ends up happening a lot of times, coaches or consultants may just say, well, here's a plan. Good luck.
Right. It's frustrating a little bit.
And so what happens is that's kind of why the consultants are to begin with, because perhaps the business owner or leader did not have the time or energy or the knowledge to be able to execute a good sales plan. So I think it's very, very important to have that second step in the process.
I think a lot of leaders often hire someone to help get that idea going, and then just need that next step.
Right.
Of motivating the team, working with the team, deciding if we need more team, resources, everything that you do. So.
It's challenging for business leaders to be able to manage all the different components of our organization. They have manufacturing, they have operations, they have HR, they have logistics, they have all the stuff to manage. And the sales portion of that is really the engine that drives the entire organization, because without a sales team or some way to get your product to market, you don't need all that other stuff. And it's often, unfortunately, the most neglected part of the business.
It is. And I find it interesting because you come in as a consultant, so you can be like you're better than a part-time or even putting a full-time, where some people may want to put a full-time person on there, but your idea is a much better idea. Why is that?
So for a lot of reasons, business process outsourcing has been around for quite some time, whether it be from the HR standpoint or from a financial standpoint, CFO, CEO, and it works because it allows business owners that can't afford that high level of expertise a chance to tap into that as a resource. And quite frankly, once the system gets up and going, the sales process that I can build for organization, you don't need a full-time person to manage that. I know that I did a lot of traveling in the corporate world, and I spent 60-75% of my time traveling. Well, so that meant only 25% of my time was at the office actually working, and so, but basically my entire time is spent with clients managing their sales team.
Wow, well, and I think the interesting thing is point you made is to be able to tap into a really high-level salesperson.
Yes.
Because you're right, leaders will hesitate to hire that because it takes away from the operations and getting the product to market.
Yes, and there's a lot of defocus, if you will. Sales leaders have to travel a lot. They have to go to shows. They have to do things, and that's all very, very important stuff. But if a business owner simply wants just that wholesome sales lead that can get things done, drive the business home, and help their team grow, then outsourcing is a perfect example. It saves them a ton of money, a ton of money.
A ton of money. So talk to me a little bit about how you get started with a client. How does somebody know that they're the right fit for you, and vice versa?
Sure. So first off, it's we can handle it through a simple phone call, either a virtual coffee, or I can meet them for a coffee somewhere, or lunch or something. Spend just a few minutes and just try to understand what their needs are. What are the challenges? Where are they at? Where do they want to be? Tell me about your sales team. Tell me about your marketing. Tell me about your sales process. And believe it or not, a lot of people I talk to don't even have a sales process. They just say, well, the sales team just goes out and sells. And so I'll know right away within those few minutes of time whether or not I can, it's going to be a good fit for both of us, because it really has to be a good fit for both of us. There has to be a need, there has to be willingness to change, and there has to be the finances to be able to do it. And those are the three things that we could find out in that first initial conversation.
It's interesting. I think lots of people get into business and grow a business because they know about the product or the service they're selling. They don't necessarily know how to run a business.
Right.
Or the sales part, and that's exactly what you do.
It's yes, because things evolve. Look at the different generational impacts that we have with whether it be millennials or Gen X's or whomever it is. They all have different buying patterns. They all do things a little bit different. Now, your product may stay the same, but you probably have to optimize your process just a little bit differently to make sure that you're being compelling to your target audience.
It's fascinating. So you talk a lot about lead generation.
Yes.
And all that. Tell me why that's so important.
Lead generation is really the fuel that fires the whole process. So if you don't have any leads, you don't have any opportunities, you're not going to sell anything, and therefore the business is not going to thrive. So I take a lot of time, I spend a lot of time making sure that not only are we generating the leads from the right people, the right markets, but also we qualify those leads so we don't have all the gunk in the system. If you had a piece of processing equipment that you spent several $1,000s on, a very expensive piece of machinery, and you just began throwing random raw materials in there, manufacturing components in there, and you're expecting to get this particular pristine widget out the other end, it's probably not going to happen very often. Your machine's going to gunk up, and it's just not going to be a very, very pretty process. That's like a sales team. So that sales team is that expensive processing equipment that processes opportunities and gets orders and business. The raw materials are the leads. So if you can consider that same process only with your sales team, that's why it's important to start at the lead generation. And Another key factor is understanding that there's a finite amount of resources to be able to spend on marketing to generate those leads. So we can't shotgun approach. We have to really understand what our value proposition is, what our core competencies are, and then who that's going to be compelling towards in the marketplace.
How do you ensure that the sales team is going to follow that process? I mean, because you're a change agent really coming in, and that can sometimes be good and sometimes bad.
Yeah, I try not to use the word change agent, even though that's what I'm doing. I think people like the word optimization, and so I'm not going to change anything, because obviously the company's been around for a while, has been successful. They've done something right over the course of the years, but something at some point in time just got a little bit off.
Right.
So we need to go back through and re-optimize that engine to make it run a little bit better. So the best way to do that is to have one sales process that everybody follows, and then the sales lead, myself, can manage that process. I can look into the pipeline and see what stages of the pipeline are we getting held up in. You know, going from discovery to stage to solution creation to quoting, you know, we're having a little bit of problem with that. You know, there's too much dwell time in between those two steps. What's the matter? Is it a skill development issue? Is it a tool issue? So really having vision in the entire sales process with the pipeline tools is very, very important. People have CRMs. They're wonderful. There's a lot of great CRMs out there that collect data. But we're not always extracting the right data to make sure that we're obviously selling to the right marketplaces. If you're not managing who they're calling or seeing who they're calling on, how are you going to manage that process? How are you going to know who they're calling if you don't have vision to that? So a good pipeline CRM will be able to do that for you.
And when you're meeting with that person and you've had the coffee and that, and you've asked them a lot of questions, you had mentioned off camera that you do an assessment.
Right.
Talk to me a little bit about that.
So it's basically a best practice sales audit. I work with a network of folks across the United States called Sales QB, and they have a program that we use that we take about 2 or 3 dozen inputs from lead generation to sales performance management on all the things that the business is currently doing. We benchmark those against the best practices of some of the most successful companies out there, and kind of gives us a delta, like here we are, here's where we should be. Here we are, here's where we should. A lot of times they're doing things wonderfully and actually better than some of these big companies. But more often than not, there's some things in there that need to be optimized. And so that's the next step. And then we can sit down, I can sit down with the principal and say, here are my recommendations. So these are the tools that we're going to need to manage that. This is how much time I'm going to need to manage your sales team. If you'd like to move forward, this is what we have to do. And but I don't slide a piece of paper across the table and say, here you go, good luck with that. I'm actually there on site, hands-on sales management.
And how many people in your company?
Just me.
Just you?
Yeah.
So how do you balance all this?
So I've got some great resources. Obviously, my wife is one of them. But you know, I can pick and choose the companies that I work with, and those are limited. I can work with a handful at a time, but it's a process I'm very, very familiar with and very, very confident in that works. I've worked for companies. One company is B2B Logistics in Batavia, Illinois. Well, they sell services. They're freight brokers. So that's one aspect. I've worked with packaging companies. So I've worked with security companies, printing companies. So there's a lot of different aspects to it. But I'm confident enough in the process that will overlay to any industry.
So, Mark, I would imagine that once you start with a company, there's a lot of heavy lifting, and then as you meet with the principal and the sales team, and your process starts to work and everything gets moving again, that your time gets less and less.
You're right. Initially, with the assessments, analytics that we do, the diagnostics that we do, there is a lot more time spent there. But over time, companies can choose to take 2 paths. They continue to have me as their part-time sales manager to make sure that things are still being executed and optimized the way they want, or they can hire a full-time sales manager. A lot of times, they'll want to keep the part-time outsourced sales manager because, A, the cost. Right. But you get to larger companies, $100, $150 million companies, and typically those are the type of companies that will want somebody on full-time.
As we wrap this up, is there one tip you would leave a business owner with today?
I had an opportunity to work with a consultant years ago, and he had a really kind of neat one-liner. He said, know who you are and who you're for. So in other words, understand what your company does and your value proposition, and understand who that's going to be best marketed to. And you're going to save yourself a lot of cost, heartache, and you become a value-added sell, so which actually also provides higher profit sales. So I think that just understanding your value proposition and who that's compelling to would be a great tip to understand.
That's awesome. Mark, thanks for stopping by and really telling us all about your company, but more importantly, shedding a light on what you do and how you can help business, because it's hard to be a business owner these days. Yes. So you are giving them some valuable resources.
I'm glad I could, and hopefully I can have a chance to help somebody.
That's great. Thanks for stopping by.
Thank you.
We're going to be back with more Business Connections. Stay tuned.